All right, picture this. 1914. World's on the brink of war. And you're setting sail for Antarctica. One of the most unforgiving places on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly what Ernest Shackleton and his crew did aboard the
Yeah.
Endurance. Their goal, to be the first to cross the entire Antarctic continent.
Wow.
Talk about ambitious.
Yeah.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into Shackleton's incredible journey, a story of leadership, resilience, and really the power of the human spirit. If you're fascinated by tales of adventure and survival against all odds, you'll definitely want to stick around for this one.
Absolutely. I think what's so captivating about Shackleton's story is that it goes beyond just exploration. It's a masterclass in leadership under extreme pressure. It's a testament to what humans can endure when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Yeah, and we're using Dan Snow's History Hit podcast as our guide, so we've got some great insights to share with you here. Now, before we plunge into the icy depths of their adventure, let's set the stage. Who was Ernest Shackleton, and what drove him to risk everything in this frozen wasteland?
Well, Shackleton wasn't a stranger to the Antarctic. He had already experienced its brutal beauty firsthand on Robert Falcon Scott's Discovery expedition back in 1901.
Oh, wow.
This was during what's known as the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, a time of intense competition and daring feats.
So that early expedition, with all its inherent dangers, kind of ignited a fire in him.
Precisely. It wasn't enough for Shackleton to simply return to Antarctica. He was determined to conquer it, to achieve what no one else had before, a complete trans-Antarctic crossing. It was a bold, some might say audacious ambition.
And to conquer the Antarctic, you need a ship, right? Tell me about the Endurance.
So initially christened the Polaris, the Endurance was originally intended for luxurious Arctic cruises.
Really?
Can you imagine? From opulent comfort to battling the harshest conditions on Earth, it was a dramatic shift in purpose, to say the least.
Yeah, I guess that name change to Endurance was pretty fitting, considering what lay ahead. Almost sounds like foreshadowing, doesn't it?
The name itself reflects Shackleton's mindset. He knew this expedition would demand extraordinary strength and perseverance.
Speaking of strength, let's talk about the crews Shackleton assembled. These were hardly your average seafarers, right?
Absolutely not. They were a carefully chosen mix of experience, skills, and personalities. You had Frank Wild, Shackleton's steadfast second-in-command, a veteran of multiple polar expeditions. And then there was Frank Worsley, a brilliant navigator who would later play a crucial role in their survival.
So it sounds like he really had a knack for picking the right people.
He did.
Any other standout members of the crew?
Well, Tom Crunan, the tough-as-nails Irishman, is another figure who captured the imagination. And of course, there was Frank Hurley, the photographer, whose stunning images documented the entire ordeal, providing a visual testament to their struggles and triumphs.
And I imagine those photographs, that would really give you a sense of the scale of this undertaking, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's one thing to read about it, but to actually see those images, the faces of those men, it brings the story to life in a whole new way.
Yeah, I bet. This mix of personalities, skills, and backgrounds, it really underscores the importance of teamwork, I think, in such extreme environments. It wasn't just about individual strength. It was about the collective ability to rely on each other, to function as a cohesive unit.
Precisely. And as their ship became trapped in the ice, that unity would be tested like never before.
And they set sail from Plymouth in August 1914, just as the world was descending into the chaos of World War I. It's almost surreal to think about these men embarking on this perilous journey, while the world around them seemed to be falling apart.
It really does. It speaks volumes about their dedication and the power of their mission. They were undeterred by the global turmoil, their focus fixed on the icy challenges ahead.
They made a stop in South Georgia, which at the time was the southernmost outpost of the British Empire. Didn't they receive some rather ominous warnings there?
They did. Experienced whalers on South Georgia cautioned Shackleton about unusually heavy ice conditions in the Weddell Sea.
Oh, no.
But Shackleton, driven by his ambition, chose to press on.
He was a man on a mission. It seems he was willing to face any risk to achieve his goal.
That's a key insight into Shackleton's character. He was a calculated risk taker, but his confidence in his own abilities, and crucially, in the strength of his crew, allowed him to make decisions that others might have considered reckless.
So they enter the Weddell Sea, this vast expanse of icy water off the coast of Antarctica. And that's when things started to go very wrong, didn't they?
Well, as they navigated through the increasingly dense pack ice, their worst fears were realized. The Endurance became trapped, firmly gripped by the relentless ice.
Imagine being stuck in a ship, surrounded by miles of ice, in one of the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth. That must have been a chilling realization, both literally and figuratively.
It was a pivotal moment in the expedition. Their journey of exploration transformed into a desperate fight for survival.
So what did they do? Did they just give up and resign themselves to their fate?
Not at all. Their initial response was to try and free the ship. They used every ounce of strength and ingenuity they could muster.
Wow.
Picture them chipping away at this 18-foot thick ice with saws, even trying to push the massive ship with their bare hands.
It's almost impossible to imagine the sheer scale of it. These men battling against the immense power of nature, refusing to surrender. What do we know about their daily life during this period?
Well, they had to establish a new routine, adapt to this unforeseen reality. And that's where Shackleton's leadership becomes evident. He recognized that maintaining morale was just as critical as finding a way out. He fostered a sense of camaraderie, implemented routines, and constantly reminded his men that they were in this together, united against a common enemy.
It's fascinating how even in those dire circumstances, they found ways to keep their spirits up. What did they do to pass the time, to maintain a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos?
Well, they organized games of hockey and football on the ice, hunted seals for food and fuel, and even held musical performances.
Wow.
Imagine that, finding moments of joy and connection, even when surrounded by the crushing weight of the Antarctic ice.
It's just a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, right? The ability to find hope and even laughter in the darkest of times. But all the while, that ice was tightening its grip on the Endurance, wasn't it?
Yes. The pressure from the shifting ice was relentless. The ship groaned and creaked under the strain, a constant reminder of the forces they were up against.
How did they react to this growing threat?
They desperately tried to repair the damage, to shore up the ship's defenses against the crushing ice, but it was a losing battle.
It must have been devastating to realize that their home, their only sanctuary in that frozen wasteland, was slowly being destroyed.
It was a heartbreaking acceptance that their situation was beyond their control. Despite their valiant efforts, the ice was winning.
So what happened next? Did they manage to escape the ship's icy demise?
On October 27th, 1915, Shackleton made the agonizing decision to abandon ship. Think about the weight of that choice, leaving behind the only thing separating them from the most brutal environment on Earth.
He must have felt the immense responsibility for his crew.
Yeah.
Their lives hanging in the balance.
It was a decision born out of necessity. Shackleton understood that their survival depended on leaving the dying ship and striking out on their own, even though the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger.
So that takes us to another turning point in their story. They were now stranded on the ice, with their ship slowly being swallowed by the very force that had trapped them. What was their next move?
Well, that's where their journey takes an even more dramatic turn. Shackleton knew he had to get his men to safety. He was their leader, and their lives depended on his next decision.
So they're stranded on the ice, their ship is gone, and winter is approaching. What was Shackleton's plan at that point?
Well, his initial goal was Paulet Island, about 350 miles away across the treacherous ice. There was a hut there with supplies, left by a previous expedition.
A beacon of hope in that vast frozen wasteland.
Yes, but there was a major obstacle. They couldn't possibly carry enough food and supplies for the entire journey.
So what did they do? Try to ration what little they had?
They decided to risk it all and set off, dragging their heavy lifeboats across the shifting ice. Just imagine the sheer physical and mental exertion. Blizzards, freezing temperatures, and the constant threat of the ice breaking beneath their feet.
I mean, it's hard to fathom the resilience these men possessed. I mean, did doubts ever creep in? Did they ever consider turning back?
Well, after days of backbreaking effort, Shackleton realized it was a futile endeavor. The terrain was too unforgiving, the distances too vast. They had to come up with a new plan, and fast.
So they find themselves further from the wreckage of the Endurance, with dwindling supplies and no clear path to safety.
Yeah, their situation was growing increasingly desperate. They established what they called Ocean Camp on a large ice floe, hoping it would eventually drift them towards land.
A floating island of ice in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. It sounds terrifyingly precarious.
It was. They were at the mercy of the currents and the unpredictable nature of the ice. You know, they had to be constantly vigilant, watching for cracks in the floe and shifting winds.
Yeah, I can only imagine the psychological strain, the constant uncertainty, and the knowledge that their very survival was hanging by a thread. What kept them going through all this?
Well, as their supplies dwindled, food became an all-consuming preoccupation. There's a poignant anecdote about one of the men spending an hour searching for a few crumbs of cheese he'd dropped days earlier. It illustrates just how desperate their situation was becoming.
I mean, desperation can drive men to extraordinary measures. What was their next move? Surely there were no easy options at this point.
By March of 1916, with winter approaching and their food supply critically low, Shackleton decided to take a gamble. He announced they would attempt to reach Elephant Island.
Elephant Island. And where is that and why there?
It was a remote, uninhabited island, a speck of land in the vast Southern Ocean. It wasn't ideal, but it was about 7 days' sail from their ice floe and offered a glimmer of hope.
Okay, but we're talking about small, open boats in one of the most treacherous stretches of water on Earth. I mean, surely that journey seemed almost impossible.
It was a massive risk, no doubt about it, but they were facing almost certain death on the ice floe. They had to take action.
So they pack whatever meager supplies they can into those 3 small boats and set sail.
On April 9th, 1916, they pushed off from the ice floe, embarking on a journey that would test their limits like never before.
Paint a picture for us.
Yeah.
What was it like out there on the open ocean?
Oh, they faced colossal waves, freezing spray coating the boats in ice, constant bailing, and the ever-present threat of capsizing. The conditions were absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying. How did they endure those conditions? I mean, what kept them going?
Their survival hinged on Frank Worsley's navigational skills and Shackleton's unwavering leadership. Shackleton constantly reminded the men that they had to fight, to never give up, not only for themselves, but for their comrades back on the ice floe.
He really used their shared plight as a source of strength. It's an incredible display of leadership. So, after all that, they reach Elephant Island.
After 7 harrowing days at sea, they landed on Elephant Island, battered but alive. It was a moment of immense relief, but their ordeal was far from over.
They were still hundreds of miles from civilization, with no way to contact the outside world. What did they do next?
Shackleton knew they couldn't stay on Elephant Island. It was too exposed, too dangerous. They needed to find a way to reach help.
It's remarkable how, even after everything they had been through, Shackleton was still thinking strategically, planning their next move.
That was his defining characteristic. He never allowed despair to cripple him. He knew the whaling stations on South Georgia, over 800 miles away, offered their only realistic hope of rescue.
South Georgia. That's where their journey began. But how could they possibly make that journey again, especially after the ordeal they just endured?
Well, he selected the strongest of the 3 boats, the James Caird, and assembled a small crew for what would be one of the most audacious voyages in maritime history.
Who volunteered for this perilous mission?
Well, Frank Worsley, the brilliant navigator, whose skills would be crucial for such a daunting journey, was an obvious choice. Then there was Tom Crean, that indomitable Irishman who seemed to thrive on hardship. And 3 other men, John Vincent, Timothy McCarthy, and Harry McNish, also stepped forward.
6 men. A tiny boat, and 800 miles of the most unforgiving ocean on Earth. The odds must have seemed insurmountable.
And to make matters worse, the Antarctic winter was setting in, bringing with it ferocious storms and freezing temperatures.
It seems like a suicide mission. What drove them to take such a risk?
They were fueled by a desperate hope and the knowledge that 22 men were stranded back on Elephant Island, their survival depending on this small crew's success.
On April 24th, 1916, they set sail from Elephant Island. What can you tell us about that journey?
Words can hardly capture the sheer terror and hardship they faced. Hurricane-force winds, mountainous waves, freezing spray that coated the boat in ice. They were constantly soaked, shivering, and battling exhaustion.
How did they possibly survive such conditions?
Worsley's navigation, despite limited visibility and rough seas, was nothing short of miraculous. Shackleton, meanwhile, kept the men focused, reminding them of their responsibility to their comrades back on Elephant Island. He kept their spirits up with songs, stories, and his unwavering belief that they would succeed.
After 16 days at sea, a testament to their courage and endurance, they landed on the west coast of South Georgia. It's unbelievable they made it.
It is. It's one of the most remarkable feats of seamanship in history. But their ordeal wasn't over. They were still on the wrong side of the island, over 30 miles from the whaling stations on the East Coast.
So they had to cross South Georgia in the middle of winter, with limited supplies and no proper gear.
They were driven by a single-minded determination to rescue their crew. Nothing would stop them. 3 of the men, including McNish, who was in particularly bad shape, stayed behind at the landing site. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean set off on a desperate trek across the uncharted, mountainous interior of the island.
What was that journey like?
Imagine this. They climbed mountains, navigated treacherous glaciers, and even slid down a 3,000-foot ice slope in a desperate bid to reach help.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. Did they make it? Did they reach the whaling station?
On May 20th, 1916, after 36 grueling hours, they stumbled into the whaling station at Stromness. They were barely recognizable, their clothes tattered, faces covered in ice, looking more like wild men than explorers.
I bet they caused quite a stir. What was the reaction of the whalers?
The whalers were astonished. They couldn't believe that these three men had crossed the uncharted interior of South Georgia in the middle of winter. It was a feat no one thought possible.
They had achieved the impossible, a testament to human endurance and the power of leadership, but their mission wasn't complete, was it?
No, they still had 22 men stranded back on Elephant Island, and Shackleton was determined to bring them home. He wasted no time in organizing a rescue mission.
So Shackleton, having made this incredible journey, immediately set about getting his men off of Elephant Island. I can only imagine it must have been a race against time.
Oh, absolutely. Every day that passed, the danger increased. The Antarctic winter was closing in, and the conditions around Elephant Island were notoriously unpredictable.
Yeah. So how did the rescue effort unfold? Did they just sail straight back and pick up the rest of the crew?
It wasn't that simple, unfortunately. It took 4 attempts, each thwarted by ice and treacherous weather conditions.
Wow.
But Shackleton's determination never wavered. He simply refused to give up on his men.
What ship did he eventually find that could withstand these brutal conditions?
He secured a small Chilean steamer called the Yelcho. It was a sturdy vessel capable of navigating the icy waters surrounding Elephant Island.
Picture this for our listeners. The 22 men on Elephant Island, huddled in their makeshift shelter, battered by winds, their hopes dwindling. Suddenly a ship appears on the horizon.
I get chills just thinking about it.
They do.
It's a moment ripe with emotion. August 30th, 1916. The Yelcho broke through the ice, and there, standing on deck, was Shackleton. He called out, "Are you all well?" And Frank Wild, his second-in-command, replied, "We are all well, boss."
Chills. Literal chills. What a moment that must have been.
Relief. Joy.
Disbelief. It was an outpouring of emotion as they realized they were finally being rescued.
Yeah, so within an hour, they were all safely aboard the Yelcho, heading north, away from that frozen wasteland. Every single member of the crew, those who had been stranded on Elephant Island, and the men who'd made that impossible journey to South Georgia, they had all survived.
It's a truly remarkable story, a testament to human endurance,
Yeah.
the power of teamwork, and Shackleton's incredible leadership. But there's another chapter to this story, one that often gets overlooked.
You're talking about the Ross Sea Party.
Exactly. While Shackleton and his men were battling for survival on the ice and at sea, another group, the Ross Sea Party, was facing its own incredible challenges on the opposite side of Antarctica.
This was the team tasked with laying supply depots for Shackleton's planned transcontinental crossing, a mission that, sadly, became impossible because of the Endurance's fate. Right. They had no idea what had befallen Shackleton and his crew. They continued their mission, laying depots across hundreds of miles of treacherous terrain, completely cut off from the outside world.
So they were essentially stranded as well, facing the same unforgiving conditions, the same isolation.
Their situation was even more dire. Their ship, the Aurora, was blown out to sea by a blizzard, leaving 10 men trapped on the ice, with limited supplies and no shelter.
It's almost unimaginable that two groups from the same expedition could find themselves facing such hardship on opposite sides of the continent.
It highlights the sheer unpredictability
Yeah.
and unforgiving nature of the Antarctic environment. And tragically, 3 members of the Ross Sea Party perished, including their leader, Aeneas McIntosh.
Their sacrifice really underscores the immense risks inherent in exploration, especially during that era.
It does.
And what about the rest of the Ross Sea Party? What happened to them?
Well, despite their losses, the remaining members of the Ross Sea Party continued their mission, laying those supply depots for an expedition that, unbeknownst to them, was no longer possible.
It's an extraordinary testament to their courage and dedication.
It really is.
I mean, they were facing almost certain death, yet they carried on,
They had a job to do.
and they were determined to do it.
Exactly.
So how did their story end?
Well, Shackleton eventually returned to rescue them in 1917, bringing every surviving member of the entire expedition back home.
What an incredible story. Shackleton may not have achieved his original goal of crossing Antarctica, but his unwavering commitment to his crew's survival cemented his place in history. What do you think were the key elements that allowed Shackleton and his men to endure such extreme hardship?
That's the question that continues to fascinate historians and leadership experts alike. Was it their unwavering belief in their leader? The bonds of camaraderie they forged? Or simply the primal will to survive? Perhaps it was a combination of all these things.
It's a story that challenges us to reflect on our own capacity for resilience and courage. We've only scratched the surface of this epic tale. I encourage our listeners to seek out the photographs, the first-hand accounts, the books that bring the endurance expedition to life.
Yeah.
You won't be disappointed.
Absolutely not. It's a story that deserves to be told and retold, a reminder of the indomitable nature of the human spirit.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Shackleton's incredible journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.